Okay, today we got something a little bit different. This is a set of IEMs that has the ability to be adjusted, at least in the nozzles, so that we can change the sound profile. So you have one IEM that can have an adjustable sound of two different sound profiles. Not necessarily two, I guess you can change it a little bit more depending on how many like tuning rings you put on it, but I digress. Let's get into that a little bit later. These are the Simgot EA500s. Let's talk about it. Alright, now before we get started, of course, these were sent out to me for review, but this won't affect my review in any way, shape, or form. Everything you're going to hear here is going to be my own personal opinion. Also, while I'll touch into, like, audiophile stuff, we're still going to get into, like, more gamey stuff a bit. We'll be explaining how, you know, that'll affect its performance in gaming. So, with that being said, let's get started.
Alright, now here's the box of the EA500s, where on the back of the box we get some graphs to define how the different nozzle tips should kind of probably sound. But I'll be a judge of that, so let's open this up and find ourselves some IEMs, a bag of silicone tips, and a carrying case which inside contains our cable, as well as another set of nozzles and a whole bunch of tuning rings that are color-coded in either red or black. But other than that, we just have some papers we're never gonna read. Alright, now if you start with the cable, it is a pretty nice braided cable with a twist braid that has a angled 3.5mm jack and for some reason has some protection on it, which we're not gonna use where we're gonna be using this. Now as for the splitter, it's a pretty simple plastic one that does the job, and honestly by design, I think this design is more durable, and if you look closely, there's also a chin slider, which then leads to the ends with the 2-pin connectors on ear hooks. Now onto the IEMs themselves, they're very simple and clean with their all-metal build. Well, they're simple and clean until you touch them because these are fingerprint magnets as well as scratch magnets, so do be careful with them. But other than that, the build is all metal, including the inner side, which has an interesting venting system which will probably affect the sound, which we'll find out about later, I guess. As usual, it uses 2-pin connectors and it has a metal nozzle that is separate from the body, as you may have already guessed by now, because it is removable, allowing you to adjust the tuning with the various tuning rings that it comes with, which we will be trying out later as this does affect the sound. Now, as far as fit and looks are concerned, it's pretty okay. The fit of them is not too bad. It's fairly comfortable, being medium-sized-ish, with the shape of them not putting any pressure on any part of my ear, though I can imagine those with a smaller concha having some pressure possibly on the back side. So of course your comfort will depend on like your ear shape and size. Looks wise, despite being very shiny and flashy in that kind of way, they're pretty simple in design, so they don't stand out too crazily, so I think they look pretty good in the ears. It's like a very nice simple silvery piece of jewelry, you know?
Okay, now let's get into the sound of these guys. Now, the sound is kind of unique, and I have to go in two different directions because of the two different nozzles with the two different styles of like tuning rings on it that will adjust the sound. You can put more or less to adjust them, but I'm gonna tell you how it is with just, you know, one set of those rings on it as it comes. So let's start with like the more standard one. That's gonna be the red tuning rings. You're gonna get more of a sort of like a U-shaped sound signature, which I am noticing is getting a lot more popular over V-shapes as of late. Regardless, with that, you're gonna get the more U-shaped sound signature, so you're gonna have more of those lows, less recession to mids, so you still get some mids and some more of the high range, but you know, not entirely U-shaped, so it's kind of more U-ish, V-ish, somewhere in between, with a little bit of a balanced lean here and there. This is very audiophile-y, so let's kind of break that down a little bit. So with the bass, it's got a fairly good weighty presence, but it is kind of balance leaning, if just a wee bit forward to give you that oomph in the sound, a little bit more feel. So, but you know, most of the feel is going to be at the lower bass, I would say, so there's a lot more rumble, but even then I wouldn't say the punch is super light. The punch is definitely there, but you know, it is lighter than the rumble, but even then I still do think it has a fairly decent punch to work with the rumble. But like I said, the rumble is definitely on the stronger side in comparison, but it's not overwhelming. It's a pretty good bass. It's fairly clean, I'd say, and it's, you know, like I said, it's got a pretty good presentation and good presence. It's just enough without being too much. This then lets the midsection also really shine, and I do think the mids are slightly forward, and I feel like they're pretty detailed, edging very close to being analytical, but not quite reaching there. So it's not like very micro detail-y, texture-y kind of detail, but it does come pretty close because there is a plenty amount of detail in here. The clarity on these is also really good, and at the same time, it's also still a very musical and engaging sound. It's overall really good mid-range. Gives you a lot without giving you, you know, too much. Now as we get into the high regions, I would say it works very well with the rest of it, not going too crazy high or not ever getting really too harsh and bright and sibilant. It stays at a pretty highish level when you go into those higher ranges, but still is like a little bit toned down a little bit so that it still remains very pleasant and easy to listen to while still bringing out some of those details. I think it's a pretty good high range in working with the rest of like the sound. It's just overall, you know, musical like the rest of it. Like it's just bright enough to not be fatiguing, if that makes sense. Now all this that I'm talking about the sound is, like I mentioned before, with like the red tuning ring nozzle tip. So if you switch to the black tuning ring nozzle tip, the sound becomes more bright, so then like the upper mids and the highs seem to like shine just a teeny bit more. I think they get more detailed and more clarity. At the same time, there's a small risk of it getting harsh every now and then, but it was, for me personally, it was not too often, which is good. At the same time, I think the lower mids and the bass kind of chilled out a little bit. The bass definitely losing a bit of the weight that it had when it was on like the red tuning ring nozzle, and the mids seem to have just kind of balanced out a little bit, feeling, just feeling more balanced versus being a little bit more forward in the past when I had like the red tuning ring nozzle tip. And what this ends up doing is you get kind of like a more stereotypical audiophile kind of sound that's like very clean and clear and detailed, with like not too much of anything essentially. Like with the black ring nozzles, it gives a more transparent, more detailed kind of sound that's less weighty and engaging compared to like the red tuning ring nozzle, which just feels more fun and musical in comparison, more engaging, you might say. And these two will like be different in terms of their effect on how you game, and both have their kind of usage. Now, when it comes to like say the detail and quality, just the overall quality of the sound for the price, as like with the rest of the trend of IEMs in this current state, which is like as of right now it's 2023, early 2023. These things, I believe, let's see, the price I do have listed down, they are currently $92, which that's a strange price to be at. Normally it's a whole number, but these are going for $92. And for the sound that you're getting, I would expect this out of something that's more expensive. Like, I've definitely heard this quality of sound before for things that are probably like 150, 170 range. So the sound of IEMs in overall, especially in the lower markets, is definitely getting really good, and it just keeps getting better and better. And as of once again, as of early 2023, that's where this stands. In the next year, you never know, maybe it'll just sound exactly the price it should be, because I can expect with how the trends are going that we're going to get like $80 IEMs with this kind of sound within the next year or two. Like, the lines of what is considered a budget IEM as well as a premium IEM is starting to get very blurry, because cheaper IEMs are getting really good, and really good IEMs got to do a lot more work to catch up now, or like not catch up, but like keep at the pace of being worth the price they're at. So it's getting really wild in the IEM space, but as of right now, these are well worth the money. But that's for sound quality in terms of how much it's worth it. Let's also get into like soundstage and imaging, because as we all know, this is all part of it. But if I just went straight into it, you guys would probably have left by now. Haha, I got you stuck in this video. So let's talk about the soundstage. So the soundstage on these guys is fairly large. For an IEM, it's larger than average, and it's got more width than it does have depth, but at the same time, I think it still does really well in giving it a more like rounded space, so it's not too overly wide compared to deep, and the height is just okay, so we get this very nice three-dimensional sound, at least with like the red tips, like not the red tips, but the red ring nozzles. With the black ring nozzles, the stage overall remains about the same size, but does feel a little smaller because of how the bass is tuned. The weight of sound isn't quite as there, so the body and feel of the size of the stage is a little bit different. It's hard to say. It's like it feels more airy with the black ring nozzles, but not quite as weighty and body feel. I don't know, it's like there's a certain feel of size that I'm not quite getting out of them compared to like the red ring nozzles. That's but when I really compare them, the size of them are very close. So when I really think about it, I guess it feels a little bit smaller with the black ring nozzles. Imaging, on the other hand, with either nozzle, I found to be really accurate. It just utilized the stage very well, because the imaging and working with the sound separation was really good. It utilized the stage very well, and it was really easy to pinpoint sounds. This is one of those sets where if you put it in your ears and you listen to a track you listen to all the time, there's a high chance that you might just hear something you've never heard before in that track, and that says a lot about its imaging and sound separation abilities. It does a really good job. I think it does a slightly better job, just teeny bit better, with the black ring nozzles, but even then I think the imaging with the red ones comes pretty damn close. Now, as you can imagine, this accuracy made them very good for competitive shooter games and just comp games in general. Tracking is really good. You can listen to the sounds of steps and easily pinpoint where they are in this three-dimensional space. Did a really good job. Though I think I would prefer to use the black ring nozzle tips for this, because the bass is more calmed down and we get more of those upper mids and highs. We get more detailed details in those ranges so we can actually, listen to the sounds that we're tracking for, which are typically in those mid to high ranges. If I were to use, say, the red ring tips, then there's going to be a little bit more bass. The upper mids and highs will calm down a bit on the other hand, and we'll get a more engaging sound, which is, while fun, not the greatest for tracking people because of the bass being more powerful. And when things get really busy, then the sound can get a little muddled up, and it's hard to listen to the sounds you're tracking for from the mids and highs because there's a lot of bass mixed with a bunch of other sounds going along. It's a very engaging and very exciting experience, but it's not exactly what you'll be looking for if you're trying to just win in a competitive shooter game, where you'll probably actually want a more bass anemic sound. That said, you can still use it for like more casual use or just playing for fun. If you're not playing hardcore comp, then it's completely fine. And even then, if you're playing hardcore comp, I don't know if I would necessarily use these guys like you can with like the black ring nozzles, but even then I still think the bass sometimes, if things get really busy, will be more detrimental than helpful in terms of tracking, but at the same time it's not too much, so it's still usable. It's still a pretty fun sound. Once again, if you know, then you know. When it comes to competitive shooters, the sound quality does matter, but bass doesn't nearly as much as the mids and the highs, because at least for games when you're tracking feet for it anyway. For those kind of games, the mids and highs matter more, and you just want your bass to not necessarily be dead completely. You still want it to be there. You just don't want it to be too engaging to take away from your ability to track. Okay, now with that being said, let's get into like the more non-competitive side of things. So as you can imagine, for more non-competitive, more open world kind of games, more like atmosphere kind of games, it'd be preferable to probably use the red ring nozzles because it gives more weight and body to the sound, because the bass, it just feels more heavy and powerful and impactful compared to like the black ring nozzle. It's just very exciting, engaging, and immersive. It really pulls you in, and it's a very exciting experience, though for some it might be a bit too much, because if your games have a lot of moments that are very actiony, very engaging, it might be fun for you, but if that's for a long period of time, it can be a little bit too much for some, because it's a lot of engagement, it's a lot of intensity in like a short, like a long sitting, in which case it might make sense to switch to, say, the black ring nozzles. But in doing so, it'll be less engaging, but at the same time you should know that it will also make the sound a bit brighter, and that may not be preferable for some who don't like those kind of sounds. It won't be nearly as engaging, I'd say, compared to like the red ring tips, but it's a bit more comfortable to like listen to, at least a bit. If the game has a lot of highs going on, then maybe not so much. There's a lot of give or take to it essentially, but it all comes down to your personal taste. A lot of times when it comes to like less competitive games, yes, soundstage and the sound profile matters a lot, but then in those kind of games, your taste in sound and music also play a part into it. So whether you like it or not depends on you. But if what you're hearing about these guys does fit the bill, then maybe these guys are for you, because for what you're getting and the sound you're getting, I think they do a pretty good job. And the fact that they still do well in like more competitive games makes them pretty versatile. You can also adjust them on the fly. Well, maybe not on the fly, because it takes a while to screw the nozzles out here and there. But point is, you get the options in one set. So it's pretty good. It just takes time to unscrew and screw the nozzles, unless you really like the sound of just one of them. Even then, just essentially, long story short, know what you need, and if those needs and what you like, so your needs and your likes, fit along the sound profiles that I've described here, or at least the ballpark, because sound is subjective, then maybe these guys are just for you. So with that being said, that's basically all I have for today. If you do want these guys, I have a link in the description for you to purchase from, and this is basically it. That's all I got. So that being said, see you guys next time.